Welcome to Almost Awakened. I'm your host, Bill Reel. We explore human development here, spirituality, psychedelics, sexuality, and more. Our aim? Equipping you with tools for a fulfilling post-religious life. This is Almost Awakened. Britt Hartley, welcome back to our podcast. I would still like to say that if that's okay with you.
I love it.
Good.
I'm so happy to be here. This is like old times. It's so nostalgic, and I've just wanted to catch up with you and just chat about things, and I figured we might as well do it live just like we used to.
By the way, you became famous in the meantime. What's it like to go viral? Because I've never done that.
Yeah, that's new. If you've followed me for a long time, I would say that I've been always doing projects that were on the platforms of other men. I was with you, or I was with Thomas Ord, or I was with, as I was finding my voice, I was always kind of on someone else's platform. And so the past year has been the first time where I made kind of a jump into my own platform and my own voice. And I appreciated you that you had no hard feelings and just wished, you were just rooting for me the whole way. And so, yeah, it's been cathartic to kind of find my own voice and to make a jump into, expressing myself without being dependent on someone else's platform.
Yeah, and I want to just point out to folks, if you'll notice, folks, Britt Hartley has 299.8 thousand followers. You are almost at 300K. You'll hit that here in probably a week or two or three. And that to me is quite impressive. When you came to me, when we were doing the Almost Awakened podcast, and you came to me and you said, "Hey, Bill, TikTok and some other, platforms that essentially reached out to me. I have an opportunity here to really grow something on my end. And I got nothing but the best of wishes for you. I think you are brilliant and you bring a lot to the table, and quite apparent, obviously, because you've made the big time, and it's really cool. And I'm just really appreciative of what you bring. Your ability to get at the heart of the matter on all of these various things that you talk about. It's self-demonstrated by the number of people who tune in to hear what you have to say on things. So congrats to you, Britt Hartley.
I appreciate it. I wouldn't have been able to make this jump if I hadn't have had 2 years of practicing my own voice and practicing what I had to say by our podcast. And so it was the safe place and kind of jumping off platform that I needed. So I have nothing but positive things to say about our time podcasting together, and I just appreciate the support as I tried to kind of jump into my own voice. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've also got a book out, No Nonsense Spirituality, All the Tools, No Faith Required. These are the conversations. I've read the book. These are the conversations that we had, at least in part. And
yeah, a lot of them.
Yeah, and a bunch
a lot
too.
A lot of them were like I was using my notes from the podcast that we had done in order to in order to do the chapter. So I'm sure you reading it was like, I've heard this before.
No, it was just so excited. Here is my friend and cohort through a lot of years, and a big fan of mine in the beginning. And here you've stepped out on your own, and you've just accomplished so much. And I'm just so proud of you. So I just want to note to the audience, folks, you can check out Britt. Let me go back here if I can get that down. You can go over here to her courses, which are available on her TikTok channel as well. And there's a lot of things that you can learn from Britt Hartley. You will not have anything but education and information that will help you be a better human if you will take the time to know who Britt Hartley is and what she has to say on things. So I'll take that down, but thanks so much for all that you contribute to the world around you. And
thanks for the plug, man, and just thanks for all the support over the years. I wouldn't have been able to make this jump on my own without the time that we spent together. So
yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what you've been up to since kind of I've left the podcast, and what you've got some things cooking over there.
Yeah, there's a bit. So one is that I'm in the middle of a divorce from my soon-to-be ex, Amanda. And I love her to pieces, and marriages sometimes thrive at various moments. Sometimes they struggle. Sometimes it's a mix of both. And ours just it came to an end, and we're in the middle of that process of sort of closing that up. So that's happening. I am dating somebody that I'm really getting along with, and really enjoying who she is, and what she brings to the table, and the conversations, and sort of connectedness that we have. And that's on the front end, but it's gone really well, and I'm really appreciative of her. So I'll just say that much about that whole situation on both sides. And then what I would say is that the thing I'm doing right now, Britt, is I signed up, paid tuition for, am in the beginning of a trauma healing, processing, coaching certification, and it's a really well respected one. In fact, I can grab the name of it here. Let's take a look, because this is a big deal. The curriculum is intense, and I'm in the second module of it. I've turned in all the assignments for the first module so far, done great. But this is, let me find it here. Carolyn Strawson is the person, and I just want to find the certification. Sorry, I should have had this ready, but you asked the question and I wasn't quite thinking maybe we would do that, but
I'm excited. I'm excited that to see like your love of learning come out in a whole new space to play. And I'm really excited to how this integrates with everything else that you've been learning, especially with religious trauma. You're kind of already like you became, I think, a makeshift Mormon historian, like a Mormon historian without an official degree. And you kind of became, I think, a religious deconstruction coach without a degree. Because you've had these conversations and been thinking about these things for so long. So I'm excited to see this whole new tool set and toolkit of human development and human behavior, and how that's going to integrate with everything else that I'm really excited for this journey for you.
Yeah, it's the second one there, the somatic trauma-informed coaching leadership certification. So it's the kind of certification.
And I love that approach. Yeah, I love that approach for you also, because like I know you're a body person. Like you're a in your body touch kind of person. And so I love that path for you.
Yeah. So I'm in the middle, beginning end of that, and really enjoying it. And it's so much of things that we've already chatted about, you and I, that is the material, the evolutionary parts of the brain and which parts respond in which ways. And then the higher functioning being more the logic and rational, acute traumas and chronic traumas, which we've at least discussed sort of tangentially before, how one has to be present and meditate. Buddhism for beginners is sort of a great framing to bring somebody back to the present moment. Anytime you can get people out of the amygdala, out of the sort of those lower end evolutionary parts of our brain that just react immediately without any consciousness, and help people get back into their frontal cortex. You can help people sort of sit with what's going on, and they can begin to make headway in dealing with things in a way that they can show up different in the next moment rather than the past moment, the way it showed up. And all of it's been great. And so I'm really excited.
I think that also fits into our free will conversations, because my favorite example of our free will conversations is the hungry judge, where your best chance of getting parole is if the judge has eaten recently, and that's actually the biggest determiner for if you're going to get a friendly parole or not, is the last time that the judge ate, because getting into our frontal lobe and the higher order thinking and the empathy and the compassion takes a lot of mental energy. And if you have low blood sugar, you're just not going to have the ability to go there. But if you ask the judge, why did you give this guy, these are similar cases, why did you give this guy parole and this guy not? Then the brain will come up for a reason, but it's not the actual reason. The actual reason is I had low blood sugar here and not here. And anyway, so all of that fits into like all the fascinating conversations that we've had about the brain in general.
Yeah. If you're in your brain thinking I'm hungry, you're definitely not in your brain operating at full function in the frontal cortex, are you?
Yeah. And you
So
won't, and the funny thing is, like, you don't know it, because if you ask the judge why they did that, they'll bring up some case and some precedent, some bullshit, but actually it's because you were either hungry or you didn't have enough blood sugar, and so your brain wasn't able to go to this higher order thinking that takes a lot of brain energy anyway. And so, like, we are elusive even to ourselves, when we talk about what you just talked about in free will. And it just reminds me of, we've had a lot of conversations about that, where we got to tease out those ideas.
yeah, the last thing I'll say is there are a lot of people, because this connects to that. There are a lot of people out there who say, no, there's free will. I know in my brain that when I decide I'm gonna, make myself a hamburger, I'm in my head and I think the thought, but you don't even realize that narrative is one of the most recent things that human beings have developed, and all of the behaviors
Mhm.
that make us human on some level came way before that. And we were making the same decision emotionally and subconsciously long before we ever
Yeah.
applied narrative to
I
it.
remember you saying, I don't remember what episode it was, but it was about, like, you were watching 2 kangaroos box,
Mhm.
and then it was
The bar
reminding you
fight.
of how people in a bar fight would
Yeah.
fight, and it's so animalistic, and yet if you ask them, they make up all these reasons, but really they're just 2 kangaroos having at it in a bar. And, yeah, I just love all our conversations on that.
You can go on YouTube and type in 2 bears fighting, and there's this great, it's like 9 minutes long, and it's the 2 big, I don't know if they're grizzly bears or what, but they sort of walk around each other first, size each other up, try to intimidate the other, like, "Don't you dare me,"
Mhm.
and then they go at it, and it's
Mm.
7.5 minutes of absolute ferocious fighting.
Mhm.
Um,
And it just looks like any WWE, or I don't
yeah,
know, any MMA fight. I
yep.
remember the moment that I lost faith in the soul, and I was listening to a podcast and I was in a grocery store. Like, I remember the spot where I lost faith in the soul, and it was these split brain studies where, they put a wall here so that one they can talk to one part of your brain with one eye, and then the other part of the brain with the other
Mhm.
eye, and they
Yep.
would tell you, pick up the orange juice. And then with the other side, they would say, why did you pick up, they would write out, why did you pick up the orange juice? And the person would say, like, oh, I'm thirsty, or, oh, I always have a glass of orange juice. And they don't know that, you were told to do that and you're making it up. You have no idea that you're doing that. And I was like, and then if you ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? And one side would say race car and one side would say accountant. And it just, like, there's no room in the brain for a soul. And I just remember that moment. And I feel like I could have done my deconstruction faster if I would have learned about the brain sooner. I feel like that I did that later and I should have done that sooner.
Yeah, you tied a little bit there into Richard Schwartz and parts work as well. Like, there are parts of us, and those personalities, those motivations might be located in different parts of the brain. And like you say, it's so simple to manipulate a human being simply by blocking one eye from seeing. You will cause that other eye to be connected to the other side of the brain, and that part will be the one that's operating and giving you reasons. We
Yeah,
also,
and they're different people. That's what blows my
yeah,
mind. Your left brain and your
yeah,
right brain are 2 different people.
to the point where if they separate your 2 hemispheres because you have seizures or whatever, your 2 sides of your brain will not get along with each other at times, and one side might try to choke out the
Yeah.
person that's you,
Mhm.
which is the other side of the brain. So,
I
um,
remember I just watched the debate last week. It was Alex O'Connor moderating between Jordan Peterson and Richard Dawkins. And I remember Alex O'Connor said that he felt like a corpus callosum for the 2 different parts of the brain, because Richard is very, analytical logic side, and Jordan Peterson's very more like art and symbolism. And he felt like it was almost like he was trying to make 2 parts of brains talk to each other, because they're very, uh they kind of depend on different sides. They're Anyway, it was very interesting.
yeah, it's big stuff. So, you and I have been talking over the last 2 weeks, trying to figure out a moment to get together, because there are some things that I've said that that caused you to have pause and go like, I don't know if I see it that way. And they were things that would make for very interesting conversation between the two of us. So I want to turn some time over to you, let you maybe introduce what you're thinking to the audience. And
I love that Mormons on any side of the spectrum, in any situation for the rest of their lives, will always use the phrase, "I'm turning the time over." Like that one is staying. That is stuck. That is stuck in our brain. That one's going to stay. You're going to be saying that till the day you die.
Once a bishop, always a bishop.
Okay.
I've done that too many times in my life to break that habit.
Okay. Yeah. I've jotted down a few things, either like I saw in a post or things that like I just want to talk to you about that I've learned since the podcast that I just want your hot takes on. So first of all, this was maybe like a year ago or 6 months ago. This was a while ago, but the most hot water I've seen in a post that you have gotten, the most pushback that I've seen you get since I left this podcast, is you saying Jordan Peterson is right about most things. And ex-Mormon, Facebook, whatever, ex-Mormon people just really had a difficult time. And some people were even being real nasty, saying like they've lost respect for you, right? You got some heat for that one. So I want to clear the air and just kind of allow you to maybe explain, because you kind of dropped that and then we were all fighting in the comments. And I was really just curious, because we've talked about Jordan Peterson before on the podcast, because he is such a strong voice in this religion space. And anyway, would you care to expound on that bomb that you dropped that one day?
Yeah, let's do it. So first off, let me just clearly say I don't agree with Jordan Peterson on everything. And when it comes to his articulation of the usefulness of religion, there are several places that I disagree. One of the things that he does is he says he won't answer whether he believes in God or not. What he always says is, I act as though God is real, as though I believe in him. And I do get that. Like, acting, how you behave really is how you tell the outside world where you stand on something. And it's also a recognition of parts work, which is there are parts of me that can't believe certain things, and there are parts of me that can. And hence, to declare that you are a believer is absolutely, if you're an informed person, is sort of ridiculous, because any intelligent, critical thinking person should have differing parts inside of them that go in different directions. There was certainly long moments, even to this day, there are parts of me that still go, but what if Mormonism's true? That's not how I would define my belief, but it also ignores acknowledging that there are parts of me that still think that thought, even if that thought is entirely irrational.
Yeah, and I do think Jordan does a good job at putting language to the irrational, because he'll push back on atheists who are only operating from a place that of pure rationality, and we're far more irrational than we are rational. So yeah, I can see that. What else?
Yeah, so what he says in terms of maybe, because it's the same argument you and I made, that society maybe functions better if we all pretend to believe in something bigger, some conscious being out there who is the arbiter of rules, the creator of morality. And maybe we as a human race have a better chance of surviving far into the future if we hold some of that. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't come with a lot of negatives as well, but I think there's some truth to him saying that. I think he's done a lot of conversations when he was a teacher. I think he was a teacher there in Canada. But when he taught as a professor, there was a lot of things he had to say about human relationships that I think he was dead on. Things that have been very helpful to me as I have navigated away from a relationship where I didn't bring some essential tools to the table in order to be a healthy, responsible person to my partner. And in exploring what it takes to make a healthy relationship, Jordan Peterson has expounded significantly. And you can still find his teaching classes and then him breaking away from that and doing sort of his own like podcast work or video podcast work on relationships. And he says a whole host of things that I think are really useful to being a better human being in a connected relationship, friendship or romantic. I think Jordan Peterson has things to say about uh, morality, the roles of women and men, that while he might be missing the mark in some places, I think he hits the mark in others. So there's this debate, for instance, I'll give one example and I'll probably get the crowd all pissed off. But in the wage discrepancy between males and females, I don't like how far Jordan goes, but there are things he has to say about why that discrepancy exists that at least in part is true. There might be other arguments that those who are more feminist or female leaning in terms of support might throw back, and those will have truth to them as well. But I think what he does is he causes me to often pause and recognize that issues are not as black and white as my brain wants them to be. And that the more we consider a voice like his in juxtaposition with someone else, say Sam Harris, I think we benefit by trying to find some truth on both sides. So when I say I like Jordan Peterson, he has a lot of things that he says that are true, and maybe even most things he says are true. I think there is something to that. That doesn't mean I agree with him in everything, and I think he says some things that are very arrogant and confirmation bias or belief persistent based, and he's too smart sometimes for his own good, that he really doesn't have the ability to hear the credibility on the other side, because he's so good at articulating his position. It makes it, I think, harder at times for him to see his blind spots. So I'll say that about Jordan.
Okay.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, a couple of things there. So you started with this that humans may function better in shared myth communities. And this is the conversation I feel like that's happening in atheism. The conversation isn't about anymore that, whether or not you can prove that God is real. I feel like that happened with Christopher Hitchens, 90s, early 2000s. And we're just not talking about that anymore because it didn't really go anywhere. The conversation now, and with like Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro and all these places, is religion good for you? Is it good for society? Is it better that you be religious than not? And that question is far more interesting because there's far more data on religion being good for you than there is for the existence of God. And that is where the conversation gets interesting because, atheists can talk about how there's no God. They can show all the reasons for that. But if all they have to help people is just nihilism, like, oh, you're not special, the universe doesn't care, you're going to die, everything is meaningless, and there's no tools for that, then it goes to the ethical question of, well, these people are just going to kill themselves, or they're just going to numb themselves to death. So how can we say that this is better? Maybe it's better that we play this delusional game. Maybe actually people are happier playing this delusional game than if they were not. And that conversation is far more interesting because it gets to the root of this, which isn't about whether or not we can prove God. You can't. Like, we've tried. You cannot prove the existence of God. You cannot. But can you make a very strong argument that religion is good for you, that community and ritual and scripture and awe and transcendence and heroes and liturgical calendars and communities for children and shared myths and all these things are good for you? You can make a better argument for that than atheism because there's a reason that we co-evolved with religion, right? We benefit from it. And if I were to play chess against myself as an atheist, the strongest argument, if I were to play against myself, is this idea that we co-evolved with religion for a reason, and we continue to co-evolve with religion. And maybe it's actually easier to deconstruct from something and create religion to what we need it to be than to build something from scratch, because we actually don't seem capable as humans of building things without shared myths. And that's actually a very strong argument that there's a lot of Jordan Peterson language you can do to build that. So that one, that is an interesting argument. That is something I think is good. As far as relationships and psychology, anytime he's in his field, which is as a psychologist, I feel like there's things worth listening to. It's when he became the voice of everything, the voice of every political conversation. What does Jordan Peterson think? That's how he gets outside of his education and his in his field. And that's where I feel like politically he can get kind of out of whack. But his actual work as a clinical psychologist and meeting with people, especially for nihilism, if you're in nihilism, I would probably recommend Jordan Peterson before I would recommend some atheist, because he has more he's afraid of nihilism. He reads about it, he studies about it, he's had nihilistic clients, he has entire lectures on existentialism and Solzhenitsyn and things that I talk about in my book, and he has entire lectures on how to kind of meet nihilism. So there are still some tools there that I think are worth using. Now, where you and I probably agree he goes wrong is he tries so hard and does such mental gymnastics to try to make it true. And it's Dan McClellan who will call him out even when he is trying to read things into the Bible that genuinely aren't there.
Right.
And he's a bad Bible scholar. I don't know why he's doing these courses with these 12 always white male men going through the Bible, because he's not a Bible scholar and he's reading things into the Bible that aren't there. Dan McClellan's calling it out when he can, because it's so absurd. And this is where we get to the space of like, how much do we have to turn off our rational brain? How much do we have to play this game of faith and, oh, I act as if I believe? How much do we have to do that to get the benefits of nihilism that he's talking about? And for me, I'm still on the side of we got to try to do this without this level of bullshit and without playing this little I act as if I believe word salad bullshit game, because I just don't want to play that game anymore. And it feels like it silences my rational mind when you're reading things into the Bible that aren't there just because you want the Bible to be true. And Alex O'Connor finally did pin him down and say, there's a video camera in front of Jesus's tomb. What do you see? Like, no bullshit, no symbolism, no word salad. What does the camera show in front of Jesus's tomb? And he finally says, after like half an hour, he finally says, yeah, I think that Jesus resurrected and rose from the dead, and the stone rolled away. So he actually does have literal beliefs. I just feel like he works so hard and does so much mental gymnastics and takes in so much bullshit to do it, that I almost feel like his fear of nihilism is forcing him to cling to these things that we just can't sustain.
Yeah, I want to push back. So,
oh yes, I get more excited when you push back than when you don't.
I love it. So let me start by saying, I think you might admit, I don't know, maybe you would think you are. I think you would admit that I'm more anti-religious than you are. What do you think about
that? I'd say I'd say so. Yeah.
At least in some way.
I work a little harder to rescue the baby from the bathwater.
Yeah, and I just would dump it all out and run the garbage.
And you're a little bit more snarky than me.
So let me say this though. Religion, for all the harm that it causes to individuals, to family relationships, to causing mass violence among one tribe versus another, including entire societies and countries fighting each other, religion might be the best mechanism we have to slow rational progress down to a necessary trickle. Because if you just said, forget all the crazy religion ideas, let's get rid of them. Snap my fingers. And what's the bad guy's name on
the Thanos?
Yeah. So Thanos, I've got my 5 joules, or what are my 4 joules? I snap my fingers, and the half of the population that is sure in supernatural magic and justifies absurd positions by using it, they're gone. And the rest of us are left. And we go, shit, that's it. Let's solve climate change. Let's make sure we elect healthy politicians. Let's not do anything that is irrational based. Let's just move along and let's plug the holes and fix it. I think the change would be so fast, and we would not take the time to see the consequences and permutations of moving that quickly, that we would, in essence, by moving towards individuality over tribalism, we would destroy the human race in a different way. And religion, for all of its unhealthiness, is the irrational way to bring rational progress to almost standstill. And when I look at what has happened in the world over whatever 2,000 years of history, it just feels to me like that push and pull of science versus myth creates a path of progress that is slow enough that we can sort of have some checks and balances as we do it. And I think with all the bad that it is, and I hate it all, it makes me want to vomit in my mouth. Maybe it's necessary for us humans to keep plugging along and do things in the most long-term effective way possible.
Yeah, I would say, and this has come up multiple times in the podcast, that I'm more scared of humanity, even though like you have been in this space long enough to know that there's some dangers in just throwing religion entirely away. I would say overall though, I'm more scared of that than you are. You're more a little bit, I think you're a little bit more optimistic than me. And I think it's because you had less nihilism than me. So you did better individually post religion than I think I did.
Mm.
And so for me, when we talk about moving too fast without religion and without structures and this kind of thing, I see us jumping into political religions, which I think are actually worse than Christianity. I I see post religion that because we don't deconstruct all the way, we just kind of deconstruct religion. We're still just as tribal. We're still just as afraid of death, and we jump then to Trump-like characters or Hitler-type characters or whoever else was going to save us, and so I'm afraid essentially of becoming too nihilistic too fast, because I think that's actually going to be more damaging for humanity than what religion is doing, even with all the religious wars going on. So I'm very scared about like we're leaving the burning building of religion, and too many atheists I think are not seeing the cliff here. That when we talk about I hope we get a chance to talk about Heretic. Do you see that movie?
Yep.
Yeah, so like the belief door and the disbelief door, they're both terrifying, right? Like if this God is real and we have to make sense of this, like that's kind of hard and terrifying, this hell and all this stuff. But the other door, disbelief, that the universe doesn't care that we're here and we're just going to die and everything is meaningless, when most people subconsciously are faced with that door, most people choose belief. The majority of people in human history choose belief, because the disbelief door is actually far more psychologically unhinging and scary and worse. And so I think we have to consider that. So if I was arguing against myself in this approach to secular spirituality, I would say maybe it's actually faster to deconstruct Christianity into what we want it to be. Like, let's just read these stories about Jesus and try to be better people and whatever. Maybe it's actually faster to get there through religion than to build from nihilism, try to build that out of nothing. And that's actually a really good argument. That's a much harder argument for me to argue against than this idea that you can prove that your God is real. I can destroy that argument all day. But that religious argument, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. And you only find that with atheists who've been atheists for a while. You don't get that day one after leaving religion. You just say like, burn this mother to the ground. Like, this is all evil. But after a while, you realize, oh, there are things out here that are very scary for people. There are things out here that make people want to kill themselves.
Yeah.
I see now why we create religions in the first place.
Yeah. I don't agree with the position I threw out. I just said we ought to consider it.
We ought to consider it. It's a good argument.
We ought to move slowly through the process of deciding whether it's best to throw it out or not. Not whether we should throw it out or not. I still want to throw it out. That's where I would lean.
Yeah.
And by the way, the flicker thing, I am seeing that now where you're sort of flickering a little bit. But
oh, too bad. I can move.
No worries. The sound seems great. So
I can move my video feed maybe a little bit lower. Keep talking.
Yeah, no worries. And somebody says, look up Chesterton's fence, Bill. And so he says Chesterton's fence is a simple rule of thumb that suggests you should never destroy a fence, change a rule, or do away with a tradition until you understand why it's there in the first place. And I will say, religion is in large part unhealthy people at the top manipulating the masses so that they can maintain some degree of power, authority, wealth, resources, and I don't disagree with that at all. But also some of the rituals, traditions, moralities aren't there to make a decisive line between right and wrong. They're there because they protect us from ourselves in the long run, and that is also true. And if people jump on the first bandwagon and go, these are just manipulators, they're power hungry, resource stealing people who manipulate us into emotional beliefs so that they can continue to sit at the head, you're right. But like you said, that's stage one of atheism.
Yeah, that's stage 1. That's
Yep.
so easy, and it's kind of intellectually lazy, and I see that sometimes on ex-Mormon Facebook groups where they say, like, "These men just wake up," the 15 top men, "They wake up every day and they know that they're liars, and they spend their entire lives just lying to us just for the money," and it's like, actually, that doesn't make sense with what we know about human psychology. That's very beginning atheism. That's very almost ignorant and naive, that people like, they would leave their $1,000,000 jobs and go do this till the day that they die just to lie to people. That's actually not what we find with human behavior. It's far more complicated than that. And we have to realize that, Daniel Dennett talks about this, that religion is an evolutionary tool. Like, if we believe in evolution as atheists, we believe in evolution. We have always been doing religion for as long as we have human history. We have been doing some form of religion. When we got smart enough to realize that we were going to die, we started doing religion. Then we have to realize that there's a reason that religion gave us an evolutionary advantage. Why we always create religion, why we tend towards religion, why we even leave religion and make another religion. Like, we're just prone to this behavior. And if evolution tells us that some behaviors give us more benefits than others, then we have to actually talk about the root of this, which is, what is religion doing that gives us the benefit, and can secularism give us those things? Now, I'm with you that at the end of the day, when you force me to choose, I would rather give it a try and see, like, how much of this baby can I rescue out of this water without bullshitting myself. And I'm happy with that approach. But I'm much more aware now that maybe there are psychological reasons why that wouldn't be an appropriate path for everyone. And maybe in that case, I should also be supporting religions when they are changing and upgrading and deconstructing and nuancing, because we need that side of things too.
All right, let me say two things, and I think the
Okay.
second thing will lead into maybe one of the other areas, and maybe we can just pull that one out now since this is sort of a segue. But first, I'll say I'm actually one of those people who thinks that the top 15 is, they know it's not true. And
Really?
I do. I do. It's okay.
Bill.
It's okay. Because I also recognize, let's take David Miscavige. I think it's always easier to jump outside of one's own paradigm.
Mm.
So David Miscavige is entirely abusive. If you trust the data that comes out of Scientology via the people who have left it, he is highly abusive. Now, we have somebody in our religion that reminds me a lot of David Miscavige, David Bednar.
Mm.
Has that same look, has that same intensity, has that same sort of facial expressions when he's trying to justify the way in which he does things. When I look at David Miscavige, I see somebody who, on some level, they might think they're doing a just cause, but there's a lot of unhealthy ego that is physically abusing people, emotionally abusing people, mentally, I guess would be maybe not mentally abusing people. And there's something about unhealthy people that they need a workaround in order to justify that. You got to still look in the mirror every day. And for me, the message of Mormonism, gospel topic essays, what is talked about, what is cut out and hidden in a historian's office, when you look at all of it collectively, it appears to me to be so carefully crafted. It's like looking at an automobile and opening up the hood of an automobile and seeing just how intentional everything is. Now, it all came in parts and pieces. It was all different inventions along the way. And almost always no one expert can understand the complexity of the entire project. But when I look at Mormonism, it is so carefully crafted and designed with so many psychological mechanisms meant to manipulate, so much obfuscation, so much carefully worded denials that on some level, I can't help but see some collective intention in that.
But lying for the Lord is still wrapped up in the belief system. So the thing, I don't disagree with you there. I think what I disagree with is the people who think that the apostles just wake up and play this pretend game that they're an apostle, like it's all a lie. They don't believe any of it, and they just do it for the money. And for me, if that were true, we would expect to see more money laundering, more corruption at the top, more
Ooh.
prostitutes, more I would expect to see more corruption than what we see. What I see is that when Russell M. Nelson says that I wake up in the middle of the night and I get, he's just having thoughts, but he's, off on his own, he's getting off on his own superiority, that, and she gets up and writes it down or whatever. I genuinely think that he thinks that he's getting inspiration. I genuinely think that in the same way that like a professor will come in and teach fifth graders this science model, and they know that it's not fully true, but it's almost patronizing in a way that like, if you learn this will be because you're a fifth grader and my science model that I'm working on in my doctorate program is really true. I'm going to adjust this what I know over here, this more complex, nuanced thing that I think I've got, and I'm going to adjust it for your little fifth grader approach to things. Now I see that going on, but I don't think that's ultimately betraying that they're not Mormon, that they don't believe that it's true. I think that they believe that it's true, but it's just this convoluted lying for the Lord, simplifying things. What's good for people? Can people handle this information? I see more of that than actually that 15 people are just pure con artists, just playing a game. Everything is a game. I don't see it to that level. I think humans are much more complex than that. I feel like they believe, but they're playing their own little mental gymnastics on how they meet the public with their own belief, because they just think that we can't handle the truth, essentially.
All right, I'm going to say one more thing about that, and then I'm going to make that
Yeah.
second point, and we'll segue into the next idea. I agree with you that we have not had these men get caught, which means we don't have any evidence that they've ever committed on any sort of significant scale. We have a story here or there, mostly in decades past, about some sort of sexual mischievousness, right? Some sort of sexual abhorrent behavior.
And we have seen cults, sorry, I'm going to let you finish, but we have seen cults where the leaders actually do know it's a lie. And I do think that they act a little bit different than how I'm seeing the Q15. Continue.
Yeah. What I would add is that you said we're not seeing these guys use wealth in some really significant way. And I actually disagree with that. I know
for how much money they could take.
I think it's way more than you think it is. This is where
even if it is, if they were just only lying, they didn't believe in God at all, like this is just a game for them.
Yeah.
Then I would expect to see for a company this big, I would expect to see far more money stuff. The trickles of stories that we get about the top. Now there is stuff and how they just, their stipends and all this kind of thing. Obviously there's money there, but for how much they have, Bill, we should expect to see more if they didn't believe in God.
The stipend is just the beginning. And when I say, okay, let's say, Britt, I pay you $180,000 a year. It's not the end of the world. It's a great income. It's more than 7% of people in the country make. Maybe it's a little less, but 90 to 97%. And but now I give you airfare wherever you want. I give you healthcare to the nth degree. In fact, there's a great chance that 98% of you are going to live to be 85 years or older because you have the best healthcare in the world. You are allowed to spend money on gifts for your partner.
What
You're
about the
allowed.
few of them that probably would be in a financially better place outside of the church because
Mm,
they could have retired, had all that, they could have had all that and retired and not done this job
I don't
60
think you get.
hours a week till the day
Yeah,
that they die.
I don't think
They
you
could
get
have
to.
actually retired and spent time with their grandchildren,
Yeah, I don't
which they
think
don't get to do.
egotistical people really care to retire. They feel. How many people do you know that retire and they're like, I just don't feel useful. I don't. I think there's. I think there's an argument to be made about unhealthy people. Take politicians. Joe Biden doesn't
But
want to retire.
even if
Donald
they
Trump doesn't
were,
want
let's say at a subconscious level, one of the apostles is like, this is a great gig for me. All of my word is scripture. I'm worshiped till the day that I die.
to.
There's so much male ego involved that you would never get as a man post retirement, right? These guys really like it's such an incentive
Mm,
to do this, right?
mhm.
But what then would happen is their brain would make extraordinary efforts to make the church true because of how incentivized they are to do so. So I
Yes.
think they're so even if they at root maybe have a shelf or whatever, their brains are so
Mm,
incentivized to do this that I think they start believing their own bullshit essentially. That's what we would expect to see. People believing their own bullshit because they're incentivized to do so. But I
yeah.
think at least at that level they really do believe.
Yeah. I'll say this last sentence, which is
Okay.
whatever that is, because we can't get to the truth of it. It's somewhere between my perspective and your perspective, or somewhere in between those. Whatever it is, I can't help but feel and notice and rationally, I think rationally, see that they are willing to sacrifice the well-being of the members of the church, at least in certain instances, in order to perpetuate the narrative.
Yeah.
And that on some level there is an intentional motivation to choose church over a gay people committing suicide, for instance, because they've got enough data in front of them that they know, at least on some level, that their teachings and their perpetuation of faulty history, their perpetuation of, even now that they're having to face the history, they still choose to carefully word it in the most beneficial way to them possible, several months shy of her 15th birthday, that there is an intentional willingness to lay lives on the altar so that this thing can continue and they can maintain their whatever it is to them that they need to maintain.
Okay, my last sentence and then
Yeah.
we'll move on.
Okay. All right, let's do it.
To me, when you talk about cults, you have to talk about whether the person, it's always lying, but whether the person knows that they're lying or whether the person doesn't know that they're lying. And for me, the type of men that end up getting picked up in this organization and do well are that their pyramid of core values, their hierarchy of core values, loyalty is leaps and strides at the top over something like authenticity, over something like whatever. So for you, you have a very high level of authenticity as a core value, very high operating in your
I came
hierarchy
from
of
the
values.
general authority,
And so
correct.
you look at a general authority and say, this is lying, this is bullshit. But if I were to put on that general authority's eyes, where loyalty is the core value that is operating their mental system, there's a difference to me between knowing that you're lying and the kind of cults that we see where they know that this is a game, and the kind of lying that you do when loyalty is your highest core value. And to me, we have to separate those two things. I think those are different cults. Those are different. And I put the Q15 more in the, your value of loyalty is so high, and you've had some experiences or however you're making this work, that I don't think that you think that you're lying. And
Yeah.
that to me is a different moral judgment than the cult leader that absolutely knows what the fuck they're doing. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So those to me are different.
And authenticity is a form of self-honesty and honesty of others. Hence, again, on some level, loyalty over honesty.
Mhm.
And how much the brain is
So,
aware.
but is that lying in their own moral system
Mm.
then? That's probably not.
When Elder Oaks denies electroshock therapy and then
Oh,
in
that
follow
one.
up,
Oh,
he
okay.
clearly lied and
Oh.
he's clearly hiding it because his brain and body, people around him give him the insulated ability to get away from it and not have to deal with it. He gets to move on and not address it, but he knows, at least for a moment, he knows I got caught. I lied. I don't want to face that music, so I'm gonna.
I would still think in his moral value system, I still think he would say that he did the right thing by protecting people's testimonies in the one true church than by being honest in this moment and having people doubt their testimonies. So in his moral system, he's probably not lying. That's what makes this more complex.
Okay, we'll just agree to disagree.
All right.
Now,
all right. Oh, that was so delicious. Okay.
I love it. No, this is picking right up where we left off. It's so beautiful. So the second thing I would say is back to what you said about you and I are both willing to try the new thing, which is let's let the critical thinkers win. Let's take irrational beliefs, throw them out the window, and not allow societies to go any further building themselves on bullshit that is perpetuated as truth. It's one thing to have a myth and know it's myth. We all go to the movies and we watch Marvel superheroes and we still utilize those myths for the same kinds of values and goodness that we take from religious myths, except somewhere along the way, someone and groups of people decided to impose on some level, and some of it's built little by little over time, but impose mythological stories as absolute truth. And then we've based so much of how we decide what is right and wrong on that. So let's take all of the irrational, set it off to the side, and you and I are both willing to go the hell with it. Let's see what happens. And now I'm aware that that could end with the demise of humanity. And there's a chance of that happening in the same way that there's a chance that we destroy ourselves by letting people like Putin and the US president, I want to stay out of politics on that side, but Putin and other unhealthy leaders who are ego-based from being able to make monumental, horrific decisions because of ego-based decisions that are not rational thinking. Now, what I'll say is that, okay, I'm actually okay if the human race comes to an end, because I sort of see us humans as we've become a virus. We are anywhere. What is the difference between panda bears and bacteria? Bacteria is everywhere. It performs lots of negative functions on all of us. It can poison food. It can infect the body. It can kill a tree. We humans are no different than viruses and dangerous bacteria. We have taken over the entire planet. We eat anything that's edible. We are in such numbers in certain places that all we do is we're creating a planet that is full of plastic everywhere, pollution everywhere, and we have killed off so many species of animals in such a rate of speed that we've done damage that we won't even understand for another couple of decades or more. That I'm actually really comfortable if we try the rational thinking route and it fails, because I think the other route inevitably fails sooner or later too. Too many.
And at least we gave it the good old college try.
I wanna learn what education and rational and critical thinking lead to, since we're the only sentient beings on the planet who can do something with it.
Yeah, no, it's a good argument. I like it. So this leads us into my next question for you, which is I had a TikTok a few weeks ago talking about the big red button. And this is a concept that comes up in very nihilistic spaces. And it's a philosophical concept that people like to talk about. It kind of goes with antinatalism. But anyway, the question is, if you could push a big red button that destroys all human life, so there's no humans left to grieve. And I'm going to have to add, because the pet people get really mad at me, let's say the pets that are dependent on the humans also die. So they're not grieving either.
Goodbye,
if you could push a big red button to end all human life so that there's no one to grieve it, is that actually a moral good? It's the Thanos question. Is that a moral good? Because you would actually, for all the reasons you mentioned, reduce suffering in the world. Now, my counter argument against you, I don't know if I believe it, but I'm going to try. My argument against you, the best argument that I've heard, is that because humans are nature, and yes, we do kill and eat everything, whatever would take our place would also kill and eat everything. Everything on this planet would kill you and eat you if it could. Everything is trying to kill you right now already. And so you actually don't change anything by taking humans out of the equation, because there's still going to be rape and necrophilia, and like animals are, little freaks themselves. And then, there's still going to be suffering, and there's still going to be lions eating zebras, and there's still going to be a virus that may just take over and kill everything on the earth. All of that is still there without humans, because humans are doing what all nature does, which is you find your place in the food system and you consume in order to kill. So for me, pushing the big red button doesn't change that, because there's still just suffering and everything trying to kill everything else. And taking humans out of the equation doesn't really change that. The only thing that you do lose is none of the other animals do art. None of the other animals start a, I don't know, pet business that start to foster animals and do really good things and beautiful things in the world. So actually, if you push the big red button, you still get death and suffering as the baseline of what everything's doing on this planet, but you lose all the art, and you lose all the sacredness, and you lose the beautiful things that humans do that animals can't. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think there's value to that. I think the bigger question I need to resolve before I could ever come down really hard one way or the other is that I would need to sort of weigh out, and again, not that I am even capable of navigating this sort of thought exercise, but I would need to weigh out which path has less collective suffering. And the other thing too is we have to remove off the table the fact that at some point a giant meteor will hit the earth again. And it won't matter who's the meanest creature on the planet when that happens.
Mm-hmm.
It will entirely change everything about how this planet operates. And there are scenarios that have nothing to do with any effect that a life form has on the planet that would end essentially all life on the planet. So we have to take all the sort of natural disaster things that could happen, take them completely off, and go, if we just had a planet full of other life forms, and we have a planet that has humans on it with those other life forms, which one leads to less suffering collectively? And you're right. Like, there's other ways to think about it. Like, if we just say, okay, take humans off, animals keep hurting each other, maybe life on the planet goes another billion years, but now that's a whole nother.
Yeah, you just backed up evolution. And so now we're going to have to go. Now some ape is going to have to go through world wars, and they're going to have to go through their own Holocaust to learn whatever they need to learn from that. And so there is an argument that says, like, actually just backing up evolution, we're just going to get the same thing. So why not continue the evolution that we have now and hope that someday humans figure out how to live peaceably, and humans learn how to create food that actually doesn't kill animals. Like, we'd have to start that over if you wipe off all humans, but humans are getting closer to doing that. So that's an argument.
There were continents, I think it's Australia that I'm thinking of, but there were continents where there weren't any serious carnivores. And there were really large animals. Because there were no carnivores, animals could be slower and bigger. And when humans showed up on Australia, if I'm not mistaken,
I think it was like a cat, right? Like there was big birds and they brought a cat, and then all the birds were dead. Yeah. Something like that. Yeah.
Yep. And so the moment humans or another carnivore, we talked about Deer Island, I think, at one point too, but the moment a carnivore shows up, it was able to just walk up and kill these animals without any work, because the animals had not been taught. It takes thousands of years for an animal that's not sentient to figure out, like, oh, I should say thousands of years, but let's say 500 years or 100 years even. It takes
to get the instincts that they need to survive.
Yep. Yeah. Otherwise, they just go like, I've never seen that thing before, and nothing's ever threatened me before. So, and then next thing you know, every species that the carnivore wanted to eat, and in Australia it was humans, I think. It's one of these moments of mass extinction on the planet. So in other words, there are places where there can be minimal, of course there's illness and starvation and all those kinds of things, but there's also the ability to live peacefully in your family groups and to have the idea that you're going to survive today and live to see tomorrow. And having a carnivore that's as dangerous as human beings, because we're not just a carnivore in what we eat.
Yeah.
We're a carnivore in putting plastic all over the planet, putting pollution into the air.
But we're the only carnival that is capable of getting closer to making food and being able to even, like, produce and grow meat that isn't
Yeah.
that we're not killing
Have
an animal for.
have you had the Impossible Whopper?
I have not, no.
It's
But
not a
I'm curious about the science behind it. That
Yeah.
certainly would legitimize life being worth living if we could, if we could break that somehow, so that's interesting. I will say, just like the hungry judge, my arguments on the big red button definitely shift depending on my mood. So if I'm if I like right now there's an inversion in Boise and I haven't seen the sun in like a week. I'm feeling a little bit of depression. I can tell when I'm more depressed or like after the election when I'm just like screw humanity or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm more likely to push the big red button. And when I'm feeling really good and I got to experience some beautiful art that other animals are millions of years away from being able to produce, then I'm like, no, don't push the big red button. There'd still be death and suffering. We may as well try to continue and see if we can work some of these things out. And look, humans do art, and it's so amazing. So I'm going to be the hungry judge on this one. It depends on my mood. It really does. My arguments change depending on my mood.
Okay, so and I feel the same way. Like some days I'm like, end it all. Who cares?
Yeah.
We're a plague on the planet. And other
Mhm.
days I'm like,
But humans are
humans are the
beautiful.
humans are the best chance planet Earth has
To
to
saving
have
itself.
life on the planet extend beyond the life of the planet.
That's an interesting thought. Yeah, that's interesting. All right, my
So
next topic of discussion, unless you had something else there, is I just wanted to get just what stood out for you with the Heretic movie, because I just found that movie very fascinating and especially with the themes that we talk about
yeah,
with belief and disbelief. So just don't without spoilers, I guess. Don't what stood out to you?
yep. So if you are needing this conversation to not ruin the movie for you, I would say push pause, wait 5 or 10 minutes, and then skip ahead to the very front of this conversation so you don't have to listen to the next 5 or 10 minutes. Here's what I'll say. In some ways, it was amazing. It, I think, can get through the cracks of someone's shell in ways that other projects, conversations, personas can't. So I think it has a chance to crack somebody into a new thought or a new feeling or to sit with something inside themselves that maybe wouldn't have happened before. And they went about it their own way. So now I'm going to offer criticism. The very beginning of the movie has two sister missionaries who are having a conversation in a way that again, if you use this show to nudge the post-Mormon into new ways of thinking, great. If your job is to try to take a believer in Christianity, a believer in a religion, a believer in Mormonism, and get
Yeah,
them,
it was a rough start.
because what you did was you had sister missionaries already acting in a way that the believer would dismiss as like those girls don't even
They're
represent
not even Mormon. Yeah.
righteous believing, because they're talking about porn and masturbation and then sex and it just isn't what a average believer would think two sister missionaries are sitting around and talking about. So not that the rest of the movie needed it, but in some
Yeah.
ways it does, because you sort of have to give the believer, you have to give them something to like tie on to and buy into it and get emotionally invested. Because the reason the CES letter works, the reason big giant data dumps of information work, is because it overwhelms the system, which is trying to protect itself through belief persistence and by defeating, sort of setting down cognitive dissonance and dismissing criticisms. You need some buy-in. You need to sort of trust it until it's too late. And the very beginning of the movie sort of dissuades the believer from trusting the movie,
I
which means
agree.
the
What do you
entire
think about flashing her garments? Do you think that was also too far
yeah,
to get the
I think
believer on board?
Yep. I think in the very beginning, you needed to make these sister missionaries look good and innocent and righteous. And I think you wouldn't have lost much from the movie had you done that. And you actually might have caused more significant change internally as people dealt with the shift in the narrative as the movie went along.
100% agree.
Yeah. So that, and then I'll also say everybody's out there making up their meanings. The creators of the movie and the writers of the script, same two people, they intentionally left it up to interpretation for you, which means none of those interpretations are necessarily true. And I liked the movie, but the first half of the movie is this psychological thriller that had me excited about the second half of the movie, thinking it would continue to be a psychological thriller. And that there was a moment in the movie where Hugh Grant really hadn't done anything wrong to these two girls. If they would have ended up walking out of the back door at the very end and would have gone to the police and said, this man had the front locks of his door be automatic and he forced us to go through his entire home to exit it, but we never got hurt. But by the end, their faith was annihilated. That to me was a much more, I don't want to say intelligent, they're so creative. It wasn't intelligent.
You probably liked like Hugh Grant's speech and the Monopoly and the doors. Like you and I probably would have loved that part of the video the most. And then like running around killing people, that's where you and I probably start to lose a little interest because the speech that he made in that kind of like church basement, like I could listen to that shit all day. Like that was fantastic.
And he gave them belief and disbelief. And on the other side of that wall, there's so much worry about what choice you make. But on the other side of the wall, it's the same steps leading to the same place.
Yeah, that you're going to die.
The movie could have been one where without ever threatening a hair on their head, he just forces them down the path of deconstructing their beliefs because they feel scared. And that to me would have been so much more entertaining to who I am.
Yeah. I will say the ending that I like, and again, if you haven't seen it, this is like full on spoiler alert. I'm going to talk about the ending, so skip this. But what I liked about, I both liked and disliked the end. I liked the part where the one who's kind of been the one that seems to be more faithful, the little sweet one, finally says, have you heard about prayer studies? And that we know that prayer doesn't do anything, but isn't it nice that we just pray anyway? And that to me is the argument that you and I just talked about, which is she's not talking about, I believe God because there are legitimate reasons to be God. It's the fact that in these two doors, God or nihilism, isn't it nice, even though we know that it's not real, isn't it nicer that we pray for each other than the alternative, which is that we just don't, and we just, devolved into nihilism and whatever. And that part, that being the ending, was really delicious for me because that was really what's at the root of religion. It's not belief. It's not that you can prove that prayer does anything. We have data. We know that it doesn't. It's this idea of, but isn't it better than nihilism? Isn't it better just to pray for people anyways? And there's something nice about that. And I did love that. Now, the butterfly part, I think the reason I didn't like that was because like reincarnation and butterfly and coming back as a butterfly, it's so not Mormon that I just kind of cringed at it. Like I just kind of like the Mormon part of me couldn't resonate with it. It just didn't feel very Mormon. And so I just had no emotional relationship with that ending. There's, I'm sure maybe some symbolism that I'm missing, but it just wasn't Mormon enough for me for that to be the ending for this Mormon girl who's escaped this house. So, but I liked the prayer part. I thought that goes into the conversation that we're having. That's actually a very complex conversation.
Hugh Grant, on the first half of the movie, it was such an intellectual exercise he was taking them through that when he suddenly, again, spoiler alert, when he suddenly slits the throat of the one actress, the missionary, sister missionary, when he slits her throat, it's like it jumped the shark for me. It was like, why spend so much mental energy
Mm.
to plot out how to get these two girls to feel things and to think things and to begin to think outside the box, only to now turn it into a horror flick and just
Do you
scare the
think
hell out
that
of you.
but would nobody have watched it if it wasn't a horror flick and it was just some guy with his analogies about religion? You and I would watch that. I don't think the public would be interested in that. There were
Yeah,
a lot of people who said, "I only watched it because I'm getting so sick of Catholic horror films. I was really excited to see a Mormon horror film." Like, there was a pretty big audience that
yeah.
was just in it for that. So I don't think that, without a little sex or blood or killing, I think that people just wouldn't have seen the movie at all. So maybe you
Have
had
you
to
ever
do it that
seen
way.
Michael Douglas in The Game?
No, somebody brought that up to me the other day. It's a little bit before my time, but I need to go back and
You
watch
ought
it.
to watch it. The whole premise, again, I don't wanna ruin it for you. The whole premise is the movie starts off a certain way, and the entire time you're watching the movie, you are led to think that what is happening in front of you is what's happening in front of you. And then you get to the end of the movie and you find out that something absolutely entirely different was happening the whole time.
Hmm.
And I think there would have been in really creative ways that this movie sort of looks like it's going to be that kind of a thing, and it never turns out to be that. And I think that movie was well watched, and I
Hmm.
don't think anybody was dismissing it because it was playing an intellectual game
Hmm. I
rather than a
see.
horror because it
Yeah.
also has a violent horror thriller sort of feel to it. I don't know, it's not like scary like Demons, but it's scary in its own way, and it turns out that that's not at all what was going on.
Hmm.
I think there were
No,
ways that
that's good. I like being surprised because I get bored when people act exactly how I expect them to act. That actually gets me really nihilistic because I get really bored. So any movie that surprises me makes me go on living. Someone
yeah,
said in the comments here, I can't click on it, but they said the butterfly is her brain having a near death experience, and that's kind of interesting. This idea that that you're dying in order to just kind of shut things down. Our brains dump some dopamine and help us to see God so that we don't make too much of a fight when we are dying. Like, maybe there's something to that. But the butterfly wasn't actually there. All of this is just what the human brain does to deal with the death of God. We have near death experiences and we pray even though we know it doesn't work. I guess that's kind of interesting. But because the reincarnation was just so not Mormon, I just couldn't emotionally get there.
yeah. Um, the movie was good. I enjoyed it, but it felt like it was also not as good as I had expected it to be, and I was then hence disappointed.
Hmm. Yeah, interesting. I think because I just don't watch horror at all, I had really, really low expectations just because it's not a genre that I touch. And so, like, hearing his little speech in the middle, I was having such fun with that I think I came out because I had such low expectations. I came out thinking that it was better than I thought it'd be. But I also love Dante, and there was a lot of Dante themes. Like, specifically, they showed Dante's hell, and there's this my favorite moment, which I shared on TikTok, was there's this moment when she goes down into the pit and the camera flips upside down. And to me, that's so obvious of like when Dante's at the deepest part of hell, his perspective shifts and he
Mm,
realizes it's not a pit, it's a mountain. And then he continues on to purgatory and heaven. And so that camera flip of being upside down was just like very Dante. So some of those elements were just like so fun for my brain and the symbolism of what he was talking about, that I just came away feeling like it was better than, the horror movie that I thought it was gonna be.
yeah, and I agree. I look at other movies. Another one that's easy to point to is like Inception, which uses a
Yeah.
lot of violence and fighting, but that's not really what's happening. There's something
Mhm.
else going on, and by the end, you're sort of blown away by the layers, no pun intended, deep that the movie is, and I really enjoy those kinds of movies,
Yeah. Have you
where
seen Everything Everywhere All at Once? Have you seen
Mhm,
that one?
I
That
have.
one was one that one wasn't too much like of a that wasn't maybe as a surprise as maybe Inception was where you're but, from like, it was such an absurdist movie, that it was just so interesting to me. That was and the rock scene, I just remember bawling, just because it was so interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, my last. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I don't have anything else to say. You're good.
Okay, my last one on my agenda. I think I'm just going to come back once in a while and I'll just have an agenda of
I
things
love
I want
this.
to ask you
It'd be
about.
great.
My last agenda before I have to go pick up kids is if I were to do any like full concept podcast with you, sit like as far as continuing my journey since our podcast and finding new interesting things to learn about. The one thing that we didn't do that I would say is the number one thing that I would come back to want to do is terror management theory and digging into terror management theory. So I'm just going to kind of lay this out and then ask you what you think about this theory because it's just a theory. So terror management theory, it came up in the 1980s and it's all these studies that show what we do subconsciously when we're reminded that we're going to die. And what we learn from that is how much existential anxiety we have around death and the things that we subconsciously do when we're reminded that we're going to die. So back to the judges, if you remind judges in the morning that they're going to die, that you're going to read this thing about death, and then you go into your sentencing, they imposed 9 times higher sentences after learning about death. And the reason is subconsciously, they don't know that they're doing this. And the reason that they think, the theory, is that when you're minded that you're going to die, you want to attach your life to something bigger than you that outlives you. And somehow in our brain, that kind of helps us symbolically defeat death. And so if you remind judges that they're going to die, they essentially make the law more important because the law is bigger than them, that they are a part of. And so even if they die, the law continues on. And so they are 9 times tougher on their sentencing if you tell judges that they're going to die that morning. What do you think?
That seems the fact that my brain goes to there are human beings who are brought into that courtroom who are hoping for more mercy than justice. And I've spent time thinking deeply about what would it be like to be in jail, to be in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, if you sit with that as a meditation,
It's
that's
very scary.
scarier than facing sort of death.
It's very scary.
Be locked away and have all of your privileges and all of your rights taken away, and you be at the behest of a whole group of people who choose for you every day how your life is going to look.
But and to know that you're like you going to that place or getting off is mostly based on like if the judge saw a car crash that morning and faced death for a little bit and also skipped breakfast, you're going to jail. You're going to jail and for a long time because that judge has been reminded of death. So he's going to put his own identity into the law because the law outlives him so that he can do the sneaky subconscious way of cheating death. And also he doesn't have enough blood sugar to his prefrontal cortex. If the judge sees a car crash and skips breakfast, you're going to jail for 20 years. And if he doesn't, you don't. Isn't that crazy? And the judges don't think that they're doing that. They think that they're totally fair and impartial, but we're just not.
Fair. I want like it's one of my core values is I want all of humanity to have as much fairness as possible. And
it's tough to come by in this world.
It sucks. That sucks.
Okay, another one. So other things that humans do when they're reminded that they're going to die. Increased nationalism. So it's again the same reason. We subconsciously attach ourselves to something bigger than ourselves so that we symbolically cheat death. So being reminded of death, we're more supportive of aggression foreign policies, military actions, dictators, nationalism, any of that. Stronger religious beliefs. If you're reminded that you're going to die, you're more likely to believe in heaven and you're more likely to reject, non-Christian worldviews if you're Christian. And so being reminded of death will force you stronger into your religious beliefs. And then the other interesting study they did is more out-group hostility. So if you show a video, and this is the study, they show a video, it includes a lot of death, and it's Jews and Christians, and they walk into a church, but they have to watch this video beforehand, and it includes some clips of death. The people who are reminded that they're going to die, the Jews and the Christians start really spacing themselves out. And if they actually watch a video, not about death, but it's just about like unity or love or something like that, then they intermingle and they sit closer to each other. But if you remind people that they're going to die, the Jews go in this corner and the Christians go in this corner, and they sit way far apart. Isn't that crazy?
It reminds me of, we've gone over the data point before, that if you ring the church bells, if you call people to prayer, just the idea that there's this religiosity in your ether causes you to be more charitable that day. It's sort of the opposite side of the coin. And we human beings are so, excuse my French, goddamn manipulated so easily, you know?
Yeah.
It's
That's why people say, like, isn't it hard for you when you don't believe in free will? And it's like, no, that's the beginning door of how fascinating what you are is. Like, for example, this morning, I had a song pop up in my brain from nowhere. And it was a song that my dad used to play when I was little. It was Venus in Blue Jeans, 50s song. Haven't heard it in 20 years probably. And I was thinking, because I don't have free will, I didn't choose to have this song be playing in my brain this morning. Why did this song that is so close to my memories of my father jump into my head this morning? And I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, you know, my dad's coming to visit me next week. Maybe I'm just kind of looking forward to having my dad around. And my subconscious brain says, here's a little song. We're going to play this song in your, you know, in your brain today. And so for me, like, not having free will, that doesn't end the magic. That's the beginning of it. What are all the influences that are making you do what you do? And that's when it starts to get interesting.
I'll go back to what we said at the beginning. We think there is a conscious reason for why we do all the things we do. And, you know, part of this, my brain wants to go to sort of saying like, hey, one of the things that we sort of debate, at least I do in my group of friends from time to time, is I debate whether we're in a simulation or not. And whether we are or not, the idea of a simulation is you're not the one pushing the buttons. Someone, something that you can't even see is pushing the buttons. Well, guess what? Whether we're in a simulation or not,
something you're not pushing the buttons.
Pushing the button.
Yeah.
Something, someone else below the surface of what you call consciousness and awareness, which is not how you would define yourself. You would not define yourself as the unconscious part of you that is making things happen one way or the other that you have zero awareness of. You would not, in any place, would your ego be able to identify that as you. Yet, there is something about you, if there's no simulation, there's something about you that you're completely unaware of, that has no story attached to it, that is manipulated by the temperature, by the air quality.
How hungry you are, yeah.
That everything about you is making choices on what you want to do. And that is mind-blowing too.
It's mind-blowing. Yeah, it's mind-blowing by itself. It's super interesting. When I tell people that, I think the response that I most get is like, yeah, there's a lot of things that are conditioned. But like when I'm aware of it and I'm like thinking about it consciously, I can actually make conscious decisions. And I think that's where most people go first. They think, okay, yeah, a lot of the things that I do are conditioned, but there's some times where I'm like aware of my influences and I'm making a conscious choice. And they haven't gone to the next level, which is that even when you're doing that, you didn't choose to become the kind of person who would have chosen A over B. So if I make a conscious choice that I'm going to write a book, I'm thinking about it, it's a very conscious decision, I'm going to write a book. Well, why did my body want to write a book instead of climb a mountain? I don't know. It chose me. I have no idea why writing a book resonates in my body and my husband wants to climb Mount Everest and I don't have a single bit of interest to do that. I didn't choose that. That chose me. So you have to, there's like levels to deconstructing this. And I usually don't have enough time to get to the end to people before they just say, shut up.
And you can keep going, right? Like
you can keep going for a long time.
Thought of waking up this morning and not feeling motivated to get work done, even though there was a pile of work in front of me. And that was unconscious. And then I would go, okay, but I'm aware of that. Like I'm an awakened human being. So I'm aware that my brain and body are trying to get me to just sit in front of the TV and watch YouTube and veg out today because something about my state of being feels like it doesn't want to tackle the amount of work. So I have to interrupt the pattern, and I have to sit with the things I need to get done and start getting some progress on them. But that also is you think it's conscious,
Yeah.
but that's
Like,
also
why do you wanna be productive? Where did you get that idea from?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
It
it's
all
all game.
eventually you'll get to mystery. Wherever you go with that, eventually you'll get to mystery. So the other points that come up is increased support for charismatic leaders. We saw increased support for political leaders who promise safety and national pride, such as 9/11. We'll get the strongest patriotism when we're reminded of death, and any political figure that offers safety, we just say thank you and we worship them apparently. Rejection of atheism. Atheists are looked at more negatively if you're primed towards thinking about death. And then just generosity towards cultural causes. So in some ways, our culture and our religion, it's like if I'm going to die and I'm going to symbolically defeat this death, then I need my culture to survive because then I was a part of something that mattered. And so what blew my mind is when you think about religious wars, and of course, Atheism 101 says just get rid of religion and we'll stop fighting people. But actually, terror management studies say the reason that this culture is fighting this culture is because if my culture wins, then I symbolically cheat death. And so when we're fighting each other, it's just a proxy battle against death itself.
Picture
And that
that.
blew my mind. That
Yeah.
blew my mind.
If World War III is already started and it happens, and it's Putin and North Korea and China against the Western world and Europe and all that, and you take both scenarios, and in both scenarios you and I die, it does feel better if America survives and Russia collapses than if Russia survives and America collapses. Like something beyond us is still felt as if it's a win when really it doesn't
We're
matter.
both dead. Yeah. It's a silly little game that we play that we don't know that we're playing. That's the thing about terror management theory. The judges, all these people, we don't know that we're playing this sneaky little game of hide and seek with death, but we're apparently, according to this theory, spending a lot of our mental energy playing this little hide and seek game with death. And that the reason that religions exist and the reason that religious wars exist is not because people have that strong a belief in their God and it's so obvious, but because we're afraid to die.
Yeah. And if you allow another little exercise, if you allow your awareness to take off into outer space, go so far out there that looking back, planet Earth is just a speck of salt just a little flick of light out there. And you sort of go like, none of it matters. It's just one rock way out there. And there's other rocks in other places where other things are happening, where other life is going on. And doesn't really matter. And then you can't help but zoom right back in. You come right back into your body and you go, no, there's a lot of shit at stake here. God, what is Trump going to do? What's Biden going to do?
I heard something that says that so much of what wisdom is knowing whether it's a zoom out time or a zoom in time. So when your child's looking in your eyes saying, I love you, daddy, that's a zoom in time. Zoom in, soak up the beauty and magic of holding your child and having this moment. That's a zoom in time. And when, there's traffic and you're going to be late to your meeting, that's time to think about space rock. You need to zoom out because that, that doesn't matter. And so I love that idea of wisdom just being, what do I need to do? Do I need to zoom in or zoom out here?
Somebody's
So
asking
the theory, it's called TMT, which is terror management theory, and it's absolutely just kind of blowing my mind. It's been one of my favorite rabbit holes lately. And if you want, I do have a Bill mentioned at the beginning. Thanks for the plug for all the courses that I do. When stuff keeps coming up a lot with clients, I try to make a course on it that's available to everyone. And I finally had so many clients that were dealing with fear of death that I did an entire course. Mortality right there. And look, it's 50% off for Christmas just for you. So I do a whole course on terror management theory, mortality, and ways to get closer to death so that you're not playing this hide and seek game so much. And actually you can get to the point where death becomes a friend. And so I have an entire course on how to kind of go through that process.
Awesome.
because it's been so fascinating for me.
Yeah. What I love about the conversations you and I have, and I don't need this to go much. If you got other things we want to talk about, I'm happy to do it. But I want to make sure I get you out of here in time to get your kids and to move on with your day. But one of the things I love about having a conversation with you is that we are thinking, at least generally, about the same kinds of ideas. And inevitably, you and I bouncing ideas off each other gives me a chance to sort of think new things. And sometimes those new things originate in my own head, and sometimes they originate in my ears because you speak them from your lips. And I'm grateful for
But I
both.
also think like we've incorporated each other's voice. Like there's things that I've said that I've kind of fit into my own paradigm, and now they just kind of become mine. And I think vice versa. And so yeah, there's definitely been some collaborating. Yeah, and I love that.
Well, I love it as well, Britt Hartley.
All right, I do have to go, unfortunately, but don't be a stranger, and I hope the audience really liked us getting back together to do what we love to do best: talk about questions that have no answer, that inevitably ends in our death and the death of humanity.
Yep. So, folks, check out Britt Hartley on TikTok. Check out the courses; they look deeply affordable, and there are lots of areas that I think every one of you would benefit from. Britt Hartley, thanks again for being on the Almost Awakened podcast, our podcast. And I hope that maybe you make a running list from time to time.
I will.
We just have a fun conversation.
I will. This is as far as what I want to do with my one life spinning on this rock, this conversation is the pinnacle of what I love to do. So thanks, Bill, and always in your corner, bud.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.